Have you ever stopped to think that maybe you don't need any followers to start making money online? And that, in fact, believing otherwise might be holding you back all this time. Because think about it. How many times have you seen someone saying they need to grow on Instagram, need to go viral on TikTok, or need a large audience before they can start selling anything? And maybe you've tried that too. Posting, waiting for engagement, trying to understand the algorithm. But in the end, feeling like nothing really changes in your financial life. What if I told you that this might be exactly why you haven't started making real money online yet? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. The internet has created a very strong idea in people's minds, that followers are synonymous with money, as if you first need to be popular in order to get paid. But the reality of the digital world works in a very different way and, in many cases, much simpler than you imagine. The most curious thing is that while many people are stuck trying to build an audience, there's another group of people who are completely ignoring that step, and yet are still generating income online every day, without showing their face, without going viral, and, most importantly, without depending on large numbers on social media. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever felt like you're always almost there, but never making any progress because you're focused on growing your following before anything else? The point here is that this isn't just a technical difficulty. It's a mental block, a kind of belief that has been built up over time, making it seem like money on the internet only comes after fame. But that's simply not true. Today, there are digital business models that don't require any audience at the start. In fact, some of them work best precisely when you start small, testing quickly, understanding what people really need, and delivering direct value without depending on public approval or social validation. And when you understand that, something changes inside your head, because you realize that maybe the problem was never a lack of followers, but rather the strategy you were trying to follow from the beginning. And this is where most people get lost. They spend months, sometimes years, trying to grow first, only to then start making money online. Meanwhile, other people enter the game in a completely different way, focusing on solving real problems, creating simple offers, and finding direct monetization paths. And the most interesting thing about all this is that many of these people don't have a public figure. They don't have a strong personal brand. They don't appear in viral videos. And yet they manage to build a consistent online income. So the question stops being how do I gain more followers? And starts being something completely different, a question that changes the whole game. And it's precisely this shift in perspective that you're about to understand. Because when you look at what truly generates money online today, everything starts to make much more sense than it seems at first glance. And when you start looking at it from that angle, you realize that maybe the game was never about followers, but about direction, strategy, and clarity on how money actually circulates on the internet. And this is where I want to take a quick break from this conversation with you. If this topic has made you reflect in some way, perhaps on what you've been trying so far, or on why you haven't seen consistent results online yet, I really want to hear from you. Truly, if this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below sharing what has resonated with you so far. Your biggest takeaway, or even where you feel most stuck in the process of making money online. Sometimes, a simple exchange of experiences below can offer a new perspective, not only for you, but for others going through the exact same thing. And if you're enjoying this kind of more direct, realistic content that helps you see the game differently, go ahead and like the video. This really helps the content reach more people who also need to hear this, but haven't yet been exposed to this perspective. And of course, subscribe to the channel too, because that's precisely the idea here, to continue bringing you content that changes the way you see money, the internet, and building online income, without relying on illusions or shortcuts that don't work in practice. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this creates a kind of chain effect, where more people begin to understand that there is a different path from what is normally sold out there. With that in mind, we're now going to take this conversation a step further, because understanding that followers aren't the starting point already changes a lot. But there's an even more important detail that almost no one realizes when they start trying to make money online. And when we start to understand this, a new layer of this conversation emerges that almost no one notices at first. It's not just about not needing followers. It's about understanding what really sustains money generation on the internet today. Because there's a huge difference between being visible and being ready to monetize. And that difference completely changes the outcome for anyone who enters the digital world. Most people start by focusing on exposure, when in reality the real game is behind the scenes. In the silent decisions, in building something that solves a specific problem for someone you don't even know yet. The promise you heard at the beginning isn't about shortcuts or magic formulas. It's about a mindset transformation that frees you from dependence on external validation and puts you in a place where you begin to see opportunities in areas that previously went unnoticed. And this has nothing to do with luck, but with strategic clarity. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a hidden truth here that completely changes how you interpret making money. Online, it's not about how many people follow you, but about how you understand the impact of a well-positioned offer, even if it's seen by only a few people. It's about how simple decisions, made with the right mindset, can accelerate your journey much more than years trying to grow an audience without direction. What's most interesting is that when you start observing this side of the game, you realize that there are people building consistent income quietly, without being in the spotlight, without needing to go viral, simply by understanding the basic workings of attention and human needs. And that's not a coincidence, it's a structure. The transformation begins precisely there, when you stop looking at the number of followers as the primary metric and start seeing what truly matters: the alignment between problem, solution, and execution. This changes your impact, changes your decisions, and most importantly, changes how you position yourself within this digital landscape. And as this vision becomes clearer, you begin to realize that perhaps what was lacking wasn't more effort, or more content, or more presence, but rather understanding the invisible backstage that sustains this entire online money ecosystem. And perhaps that's the most important point in this whole conversation. Because when we talk about making money online, there's such a strong myth that it completely shapes how people start or fail to start. The myth of followers has created a kind of collective illusion, as if social validation were the main currency of the digital world, as if you could only be taken seriously after reaching a specific number, as if the value of an idea depended directly on the number of people looking at you. But when you start to observe the behind-the-scenes workings of the digital market, you realize that this doesn't hold up in practice. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what almost no one realizes is that followers are just a superficial layer of something much bigger. They may even help in some situations, but they are not the main engine of income generation. What really drives this system is something completely different: intention, context, and, above all, how you connect a solution to a real need. The hidden truth here is that there are people making money online without ever having built a traditional audience. They don't rely on virality, they don't depend on constant public approval, and often they don't even show their face. What they understood was the invisible logic of the game. It's not about being seen by many, but about being relevant to someone who is already looking for a solution. And that completely changes the mindset. Because when you take the pressure off having followers, you also remove one of the biggest emotional blocks in the digital journey: the feeling that you need to be big to start. In practice, this brings you back to the most important point of all, which is execution. From that moment on, simple decisions begin to have a much greater impact. You stop asking yourself how many people will see this, and start asking yourself, does this solve a real problem? And this change in perspective alters your entire journey, because you begin to see opportunities where before you only saw limitations. And it's curious how this transformation happens so silently. Little by little, you realize that the game wasn't about followers per se, but about structure, positioning, and clarity of message. And when that aligns, the impact of your work stops depending on numbers and starts depending on direction. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this creates a kind of movement where each new shared insight strengthens this journey of collective understanding. Comment below: this makes sense to me. And when this fog surrounding the myth of followers begins to dissipate, a question arises that completely changes the course of this conversation. If it's not the followers who actually generate money online, then what really sustains it all? Because there's a truth that's rarely stated clearly. Money on the internet doesn't come from visibility, but from structure. And structure here means something much simpler, and at the same time, much more powerful than it seems. It's the combination of a real problem, a clear solution, and a straightforward delivery path. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what truly generates money online isn't tied to the size of your audience, but to the precision of your message. There's a huge difference between speaking to many and being relevant to a select few. And it's precisely at this point that most people get lost on the digital journey. The great hidden truth is that the market doesn't reward empty attention, it rewards intention. When someone is looking for a solution, they're not concerned with how many followers you have, but rather with how much you can shorten the path between their problem and the solution. And that completely changes the logic of the game. That's why you see ordinary people, without a large online presence, managing to generate consistent income simply because they understood this invisible mechanism. They aren't focused on building a huge public image, but on creating small points of impact that generate real movement. And this movement, even if silent, is what sustains the continuous generation of money online. When you begin to see this clearly, your mindset undergoes a profound transformation. You stop seeking validation and start seeking direction. Your decisions cease to be based on reach and become based on impact. And this completely changes the way you build anything in the digital world. And perhaps the most interesting thing about all this is realizing that making money online isn't a random event, but the result of a series of consistent decisions made behind the scenes. It's a journey that doesn't depend on fame, but on understanding. And the more you observe what goes on behind the scenes, the more you realize there are clear patterns behind it all. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this strengthens the exchange of ideas that goes far beyond a simple video. creating an environment where ideas begin to transform into action. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. And when you start to realize that making money online doesn't come from followers, fame, or social approval, an even deeper shift occurs within your way of thinking, because the problem was never just technical. It was always mental. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the new mental model of the internet isn't about becoming someone big, but about becoming someone clear. Clear in what you solve, clear in what you deliver, and clear in the type of impact you generate, even if it starts small, silent, and almost invisible at first. The truth is, there's an internal transformation that completely separates those who get stuck trying to understand how to grow from those who actually start building results. And this transformation doesn't happen when you gain followers, but when you change how you perceive value. This is where one of the most important revelations of this journey comes in. On the internet, those who understand the other person's problem more accurately come out ahead, regardless of the size of their audience. This new mental model takes you out of a race for attention and puts you on a much more strategic path. Instead of thinking about reach, you start thinking about impact. Instead of trying to be seen by everyone, you start focusing on being useful to someone specific, and that completely changes the way you make decisions. Because when your mindset changes, your actions change too. You stop producing content expecting validation and start producing with intention. You stop trying to appear relevant and start building real relevance through simple solutions. And this creates a cumulative effect that, over time, transforms into concrete results. There's a little discussed aspect to this process. Most people who fail in the digital world don't fail due to a lack of opportunity, but because they continue to operate with an outdated mindset, based on visibility rather than direction. Meanwhile, those who understand this shift are beginning to advance almost silently, but steadily. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this reinforces this exchange of perception where each new idea helps to expand this vision collectively. Comment below. This makes sense to me. And when this change in mindset begins to solidify, something very interesting happens. You start to see the digital world in a completely different way, as if a filter has been removed from your perception. And that's precisely where the examples that almost no one pays enough attention to come in. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because there are real people, every day, building income online without any significant audience. And we're not talking about isolated cases or outliers, but about patterns that repeat themselves in different formats of digital activity. Consider, for example, someone who starts by offering a simple service on freelance platforms. This person doesn't need followers, doesn't need to go viral. They only need clarity in what they deliver and consistency in execution. Gradually, they will understand what the market values and adjust their offering. The money starts to appear not because they became famous, but because they became useful within a specific context. Another example comes from people who work with affiliate marketing strategically, without ever showing their face. They don't build their own audience, but they know how to position content in places where there is already purchase intent. And this completely changes the game, because here, the focus is not on attention, but on intent. It's not about how many people follow you, but about how many people are already looking for what you connect them with. And there is a third scenario, perhaps even more interesting, involving utilitarian content. People who create small bridges between questions and solutions, often on blogs, simple pages, or discrete channels, without a face, without a strong personal brand, but with a clear understanding of impact. They don't depend on social validation. They depend on practical utility. The common thread among all these examples is simple, yet profound. None of these people started with an audience. They started with a decision. And that decision completely changed how they interacted with the digital environment. While many were trying to grow first and then win, they were winning while learning how to grow. This reveals something important about the digital journey. Growth is not an initial condition, but a consequence of a well-applied structure. And when you start to observe these behind-the-scenes aspects closely, you realize that there is an invisible pattern connecting all these trajectories. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this reinforces this collective construction of perception, where each new shared vision broadens the understanding of the game. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. And when you look at these examples more closely, an inevitable question begins to arise. If so many people manage to start from scratch, without followers, without authority, and without an audience, then what really separates those who move forward from those who remain stuck in the same position for months or even years? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the answer isn't in something complex or inaccessible, but in direction and simplicity. There are paths in the digital world that don't require building a prior audience, and this completely changes the perception of those who are just starting out. The problem is that most people try to start with the most difficult path, when there are much more direct routes. The first path is the simplest of all, and, at the same time, one of the most ignored, providing digital services. Here, you don't need followers, you need a skill applied to a real problem. It could be writing, editing, design, organization, support, or any other service that solves a specific pain point. The money doesn't come from your visibility, but from your ability to execute and your consistency. It's a path that transforms ordinary people into digital professionals without depending on exposure. The second approach involves understanding how existing attention on the internet works. Instead of trying to build an audience from scratch, some people enter the existing content flow and connect solutions to real intentions. It's a model based on intelligent positioning, where the focus isn't on being seen by many, but on being present at the right time, for the right person, with the right solution. This creates a dynamic where reach isn't built, it's accessed. And the third path is perhaps the quietest of all, but also one of the most consistent, utilitarian content. Here, the logic changes completely, because you don't need a face or a strong personal brand. You create small bridges between questions and answers, between problems and solutions. And this, over time, generates a natural flow of interest and monetization. It's a more technical than emotional process, more structured than performative. Now, when you put these three paths side by side, something becomes clear. None of them depends on followers as a starting point. They all depend on one thing in common, which is clarity about what you are solving and how you connect it to the market. True transformation happens when you stop looking at digital as a game of exposure and start seeing it as a system of solutions. And that completely changes your decisions, your pace, and your way of acting within this journey. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this strengthens this collective construction of perception, where each new vision opens space for an even deeper understanding of this process. Comment below, this makes sense to me. And when you begin to see these three paths more clearly, a new layer of this journey appears. Almost like a mirror revealing something that many people don't want to admit at first. It's not the lack of opportunity that makes people freeze, but a silent pattern of behavior that repeats itself even before the results appear. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there is a specific, almost invisible mistake that causes most people to give up too early in the world of online money. And this mistake is not related to technique or strategy, but to expectation. The expectation of immediate results without understanding the process. The hidden truth here is that many people enter the digital world believing that the return needs to be quick to be worthwhile. And when that doesn't happen in the first few days, or in the first attempts, they interpret it as failure. When in reality, they are only at the beginning of a process that hasn't yet had time to mature. This pattern creates a very strong distortion of perception. The person starts out motivated, full of energy, but without a mindset prepared for the process. And when the first results don't appear, they don't adjust course. They simply abandon the journey. And it is precisely here that the cycle repeats itself, almost invisibly. The most interesting thing is that those who truly succeed aren't necessarily those who get everything right at the beginning, but those who understand that the digital game is made of adjustment, repetition, and interpreting impact. These people don't interpret a lack of results as a lack of potential, but as a lack of alignment between action and strategy. And this completely changes how you approach each attempt. Instead of giving up early, you start observing patterns. Instead of abandoning the path, you start adjusting decisions. And this creates a huge difference over time. Because while some stop halfway through the process, others continue refining until something starts to work. There is also an important psychological element here: comparison. Many people give up not because they are failing, but because they are comparing themselves to the final results of others, without seeing the complete picture behind those journeys. And this creates an illusion of being behind that does not correspond to reality. When you understand this, something changes internally. You begin to respect the process, the journey, and the time it takes to build something more. And this puts you in a much more emotionally stable position within the digital world, because you stop acting on impulse and start acting on direction. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this reinforces this continuous exchange of perception, where each new vision helps to build a deeper understanding of this scenario. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. And when you begin to understand this mistake that causes so many people to give up early, an inevitable question arises. If most people freeze up because of expectations, then what would be the right way to start without falling into that same cycle of frustration and abandonment? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the real turning point isn't in a specific technique, but in an internal mindset shift that completely redefines how you view the beginning of your digital journey. It's not about accelerating results, but about aligning your decisions with a more realistic and strategic logic of building. The first mental step is simple, yet extremely powerful. Choose a specific problem to observe. It's not about trying to embrace everything, nor searching for the perfect idea, but identifying something real that exists in the market and that you can understand clearly. This move takes you out of the realm of confusion and puts you in the realm of direction. The second step is understanding that execution comes before emotional validation. This means you don't start by waiting for trust, you start by building clarity through action. Each small attempt isn't a test of success or failure, but a collection of information about what works and what needs adjusting. This completely changes how you relate to the process. The third step involves accepting that the beginning is naturally imperfect. There's a little discussed truth here. Nobody starts in the digital world with perfect precision. What differentiates those who succeed is the ability to adjust without giving up, to interpret the journey as a progressive construction, not as immediate proof of results. When these three elements align, something important happens internally. The anxiety for immediate results begins to lose its power, and in its place emerges a sense of direction. You stop acting on impulse and start acting with intention. And this creates a silent, yet extremely profound transformation in how you build anything online. And perhaps the most interesting thing about all this is realizing that the step-by-step process isn't about complexity, but about mental consistency applied to the right action. Small decisions, repeated with clarity, begin to generate impact over time, even if at the beginning they seem too simple to be relevant. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, and this strengthens the continuous construction of perception, where each new reflection adds another layer to this journey of understanding. Comment below, this makes sense to me, and when these steps start to make sense in practice, something even deeper happens within this journey. You realize that it wasn't a lack of knowledge that prevented you from moving forward, but the way you interpreted the process itself from the beginning. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because reinforcing this shift isn't about learning more things, but about consolidating a new way of seeing the reality of online money. And this new vision completely changes the emotional weight of your decisions. The hidden truth here is that most people remain trapped not because of a lack of opportunity, but because they still operate with the outdated mindset that results need to be immediate to be valid. But when you understand how this digital environment truly works, you realize that everything is a process of construction, not an isolated event. This turning point happens when you stop seeing each attempt as something definitive and start seeing it as part of a strategic sequence. Each action takes on a different value, not for the immediate result it generates, but for the learning it adds to your journey. And this drastically reduces the internal pressure that usually makes so many people stop halfway through. The most interesting thing is that, in this new mental state, the concept of failure begins to lose its power. What previously seemed like a mistake becomes merely a course correction. What previously seemed like a delay becomes simply a maturation period. And this change in perception creates an emotional stability that is extremely rare in those who are starting out in the digital world. And this is where the real impact of this shift becomes apparent. You begin to act with more clarity, less anxiety, and more direction. Not because the path has become easier, but because your perspective on the path has matured. And this completely alters how you react to initial results. The journey ceases to be a race for external validation and becomes an internal construction of consistency. And when that happens, what once seemed distant begins to become more tangible, not by luck, but by alignment between mindset and execution. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And this reinforces this continuous exchange of perception, where each new reflection helps to consolidate this transformation collectively. Comment below, this makes sense to me, and if you've made it this far, this conversation probably made sense to you on some deeper level, because not everyone stops to calmly consider this kind of mindset shift regarding online money, followers, and building income on the internet. If this content helped you see the game in a clearer, more realistic way, and less trapped by myths that end up holding many people back at the beginning, consider subscribing to the channel. The idea here is precisely that, to continue bringing this kind of perspective that changes how you make decisions and build your digital journey, without illusions and unrealistic shortcuts. And if you've actually made it to the end, comment below, I'm with you until the end, because that shows you not only watched, but truly followed the entire idea, development from beginning to end. This really helps us understand who is truly immersed in this type of content. Also, leave a like on the video, not as an automatic gesture, but as a sign of connection with this conversation, because it helps this content reach other people who are also in this same moment of reflection and mindset change. And now, if you want to continue expanding on this vision, there's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, further deepening this idea of how income and impact building works in the digital world in a way that almost no one explains. Click on it and continue with me there.